The world feels tense. Chaos, conflict, and uncertainty dominate the headlines. Today's question is not one of politics alone, but of prophecy. Are we witnessing the fulfillment of ancient vision? Is the war in the Middle East the spark that ignites the final fire? With tensions surging between Israel and Iran and the long-standing conflict with the Palestinians escalating once more, many are wondering, is this the beginning of the biblical end times? As of this recording, the world has shifted once more. The United States and Israel have launched a joint strike on Iran. The air trembles with consequence. The sky watches, silent and ancient. This isn't just a headline. For some, it's the echo of the Psalm 83 prophecy that foretells of a coalition of Israel's neighboring nations seeking to annihilate Israel. Perhaps it is Ezekiel's prophecy of Gog-Magog, where a coalition of nations will choose the path of war, and God will come to right all wrongs, and the world begins anew. Let's explore the sacred texts, current global events, and what it all might mean for humanity, for consciousness, and for the soul. However, as we peer into prophecy, let us not sensationalize. We will reflect with wisdom, reverence, discernment, and spiritual clarity. The Bible speaks often of a climactic period in history known as the end of days or the end times. This is described most vividly in the book of Revelation, through the writings of the prophet Daniel, Ezekiel, and in the words of Jesus himself in the Gospels. Key elements of the biblical end times prophecies include the rise of nation against nation, earthquakes, famines, and pestilence. The prophecies whisper of a final battle centered around Jerusalem, often referred to as Armageddon, and the rise of a world leader who is also the Antichrist. The prophecies end with divine judgment and the establishment of a new earth. In Matthew 24, Jesus tells his disciples, "You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come." In Ezekiel chapters 38 and 39, the prophet delivers a vision, cryptic, thunderous, and deeply symbolic. God says, "Set your face against Gog, of the land of Magog. I will bring you against my people Israel, and I will execute judgment upon you with plague and bloodshed." In essence, these phrases from Ezekiel describe a future event where a powerful entity, Gog from the land of Magog, will lead an invasion against Israel, and God will intervene with powerful judgments, ultimately resulting in the defeat of Gog and his forces. The prophecy names a coalition of nations: Persia, which is modern-day Iran, Cush, Put, Gomer, and Togarmah, rising up against a people restored to their land and living in apparent peace in an unwalled land. The prophecy ends not with human victory, but divine intervention, fire from heaven, judgment from above, a cosmic reckoning. As God says, "And so I will show my greatness and my holiness, and I will make myself known in the sight of many nations." Ezekiel 38:23. This is known as the Ezekiel prophecy. However, this is not the only biblical prophecy of war. In Psalm 83, we are given another glimpse into a different conflict, one often overlooked. Psalm 83 is a plea for divine intervention as a confederacy of Israel's immediate neighbors conspires to erase her from existence. As this confederation proclaims, "Come, let us cut them out as a nation. Let the name of Israel be remembered no more." Psalm 83:4. The coalition of nations that will confer upon Israel are Edom, Moab, Ammon, the Philistines, and the Hagrites. These correspond today to areas of Jordan, Gaza, Lebanon, and parts of Syria and Saudi Arabia. These are not distant enemies, but close neighbors, those directly bordering the land of Israel. Psalm 83 describes a precursor to the Gog-Magog War, a regional conflict in which Israel is attacked by a coalition of Arab states, perhaps leading to overwhelming Israeli victory and a temporary peace, thus setting the stage for the larger invasion of Gog and Magog. Could the current alliance of Iran with Hamas, Hezbollah, and factions in Syria be foreshadowing this war? Could we be living in the early stages of a prophecy long hidden in plain sight? We now find ourselves in eerie parallel to the Psalm 83 war, which precedes the Gog-Magog war, which leads to Armageddon. Tensions between Iran and Israel have escalated dramatically in recent years. Israel views Iran's nuclear ambitions as an existential threat, while Iran supports militant groups like Hezbollah and Hamas, who actively resist the Israeli state. Just yesterday, the United States and Israel launched coordinated attacks on Iranian military targets, a direct and dangerous escalation in a region already trembling on the edge. Some believe this move may tip the balance of power in Israel's favor, potentially securing a decisive victory in what some interpret as the unfolding of the Psalm 83 war. If so, the final piece of that prophetic puzzle would be a temporary period of peace, a calm before the storm, setting the stage for the greater conflict foretold in the Gog-Magog war, which leads to the final battle, Armageddon. This is the Battle of Armageddon, not merely a war of nations, but the ultimate confrontation between light and shadow, between the false kings of the world and the true sovereign of the spirit. It is the final dismantling of illusion, the fall of corrupt powers, empires, and ideologies that have ruled by fear, deception, and spiritual blindness. The name Armageddon is derived from the Hebrew Har Megiddo, meaning Mount of Megiddo, a physical location in northern Israel, historically a site of many battles. Yet in Revelation, it is not just geography, it is symbolic topography. It is the high place where heaven and earth collide, a battlefield not only of flesh and blood, but of spirit and soul. This final war is not simply military, it is mythic. It is the struggle between the forces that enslave human consciousness and the liberating power of divine truth. The beast is not just a ruler, it is the egoic system that dominates the world. Materialism, domination, and the false self elevated as God instead of the divine soul. Gog and Magog are not the same as Armageddon, but the themes converge. One represents the last physical war, the other, the final spiritual rebellion. However, in Revelation, Gog and Magog reappear, this time as symbolic archetypes of worldwide deception and rebellion. God says, "And when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison to deceive the nations in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog." But again fire descends from the heavens. The rebellion is destroyed, and the new world begins. From a mystical lens, Psalm 83, Gog-Magog and Armageddon are not only possible historical or future events, they are initiations. They mark the trials of nations, the testing of humanity, and the internal crucible of the soul. So, are we in the biblical end times? We are seeing a global rise in political instability, massive solar storms and climate anomalies, artificial intelligence reshaping human life, a moral and spiritual decline, and increasing unexplained aerial phenomena in the heavens. Could these be the birth pangs Jesus spoke of? Nations are rising against nations. Earth groans with imbalance. People hunger for truth in a world of confusion. The names of ancient prophecy, Gog, Magog, Persia, Edom, Armageddon, now appear on the lips of all generations. On June 21st, 2025, the day of the summer solstice, the United States and Israel launched coordinated attacks on Iranian nuclear facilities, a direct and dangerous escalation in a region already trembling on the edge. Iran is not only a modern geopolitical player, but a named nation in both Ezekiel and Psalmic prophecies. For many, this is a moment long foretold. Some evangelicals have even argued that these strikes on Iran are not merely strategic, they are prophetic, and that President Donald Trump was divinely appointed to delay or direct the timeline of the end times, positioning America as a guardian of Israel's biblical destiny. However, others believe the opposite, that Donald Trump is Gog and the United States is Magog. That his purpose is to deceive the nations in the four corners of the earth, as foretold in the Bible. According to Scripture, Gog begins to play God, to decide who lives, who dies, who eats, who starves. However, playing God is choosing to let them starve. Walking in God's footsteps means to serve them food. While the world leaders of the world choose unwisely, each of us still has a choice. And here lies the inherent danger. Like myth, prophecy is up to interpretation. The attempt to weaponize interpretation of prophecy for political validation will lead to disaster. When sacred scripture is filtered through ideology, it risks becoming a tool of confirmation bias rather than divine revelation. Prophecy is meant to awaken and not to justify war, nationalism, or domination. We must also consider the fragility of the transmission itself. The Bible in its current 42 versions has been written, edited, translated, and canonized through centuries of human hands. Empires have touched it, councils have shaped it, entire books have been lost, hidden, or deemed heretical. So, when we quote prophecy as absolute, are we invoking pure divine wisdom or a refracted echo passed through layers of interpretation and institutional control? To approach prophecy without this awareness is to risk turning metaphor into dogma and spiritual warning into political weaponry. Take, for example, Ezekiel's vision that war would come to Israel, where Israel is described as a land of peaceful, unwalled, unsecure villages, where people gathered from many nations. This has long been thought to reference modern Israel being attacked unwittingly by Iran. But Israel today is no unwalled, frail nation. It is one of the most fortified and technologically advanced military powers in the world. So, we must ask, who truly fits that prophetic image? Could it be, uncomfortably, that the vulnerable, unwalled village that will be attacked unwittingly is not Israel but Gaza? The stateless, the occupied, the forgotten. If we mistake political allegiance for divine insight, we risk reversing the roles. Not in alignment with the divine, but in service of our own interpretations, desires, and beliefs. This is the paradox of prophecy. It is both sacred and dangerous. It reveals truth, but only to those willing to look beyond fear, pride, and tribalism. Prophecy was never meant to predict headlines with mathematical precision. It was meant to awaken consciousness, to illuminate the soul's path through darkness. Yet today, prophecy is being wielded like a sword, used to justify rather than to question. We forget that the Bible is not a geopolitical blueprint, it is a spiritual mirror. And what we see in it often reflects who we are, more than what is truly coming. The flaw is not in prophecy itself, but in how we interpret it, how we impose our desires and fears upon it. We must remember that prophecy is not fate, it is food for thought, an open door, a sacred warning, a test of discernment. The fact that the wars in Israel have gone on for centuries begs the question, is the Holy Land the epicenter of perpetual catalyst? Does the Middle East serve as a constant wheel churning out issues, forcing the world to make collective and individual choices? And if so, how are our choices shaping reality? Before we rush to fulfill prophecy with bombs and blood, we must ask, what if the true prophecy is not the destruction of the world, but the awakening of the soul? What if the final battle is not between nations, but within each of us? As we reflect on the attacks against Iran, the suffering in Gaza, and the tremors shaking the earth, we must hold both the grief and the hope. Hope that through fire, we are not consumed, but purified. Hope that what ends is not life, but illusion. Hope that beyond war is the stillness of the divine. Every generation meets the same choice: to choose love over fear. We must choose wisely. For it is told in Scripture and ancient wisdom that those who choose incorrectly continue on the wheel, to be reborn until they remember true love and embody the words of Christ. Those who choose wisely ascend. This was Jesus' message and the message found in time memorial. Perhaps the final prophecy is not one written in scrolls, but the one written in us all, in our love, in our courage, in our awakening to oneness and peace. Thank you for joining me in this sacred reflection. Stay grounded, stay awake. If this episode resonated, please share it and consider the role you play in this unfolding mystery. Until next time, walk in reverence and speak with light. Namaste.